It's 1900 hours GMT, live from the News Hub at Adesanwe in Kanda, Accra. I am Solis Rose Quarte. Welcome to News 360.
Asamoah is my name. Stay tuned as we bring you the headlines for tonight.
News 360 headlines is brought to you by Deluxe Paint, Heaven Black Mosquito Coil and Spray,
Premier Health Insurance.
Saying goodbye is never easy. I have spent most of my life working with the United Nations. As we begin the next phase of our lives, Nan and I will still be with you in spirit.
Tributes pour in following the demise of former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan.
Ghana Standards Authority declares zero tolerance for substandard products.
In Mission tonight, Kachilendo District Assembly Primary School receives furniture from Ghana Education Service.
And thousands await rescue at Kerala in the southern India as flood toll tops 200. All these and more stories, including sports and entertainment, coming up in the next 60 minutes. Don't forget that we are live on DSTV channel 279. And we're starting off the bulletin on a rather sad note into news that broke earlier today. Former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, has died at the age of 80. The late Kofi Annan, who served as the 7th UN chief for almost 10 years, died on Saturday in Geneva, Switzerland.
The late Kofi Atta Annan was born in Kumasi in central Ghana on April 8, 1938. Kofi Annan is descended from tribal chiefs on both sides of his family. His father was an educated man, and Annan became accustomed to both traditional and modern ways of life. He has described himself as being a tribal in a tribal world. After receiving his early education at a leading boarding school in Ghana, Annan attended the College of Science and Technology in Kumasi. At the age of 20, he won a Ford Foundation scholarship for undergraduate studies at McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota, where he studied economics. Even then, he was showing signs of becoming a diplomat or someone skilled in international relations. Kofi Annan received his bachelor's degree in economics in 1961. Shortly after completing his studies at McAllister College, Kofi Annan headed for Geneva, Switzerland, where he attended graduate classes in economics at the Institut Université des Hautes Études Internationales. Following his graduate studies in Geneva, Kofi Annan joined the staff of the World Health Organization, a branch of the United Nations. He served as an administrative officer and a budget officer in Geneva. Later, UN posts took him to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and New York City, New York. Kofi Annan always assumed that he would return to his native Ghana after college, although he was disturbed by the unrest and numerous changes of government that occurred there during the 1970s. Kofi Annan became the Alfred P. Sloan Fellow at Massachusetts University of Technology. At the end of his fellowship in 1972, he was awarded a Master of Science degree in Management. Rather than return to Ghana upon graduation, he accepted a posting at the UN headquarters in New York City. In 1974, he moved to Cairo, Egypt, as Chief Civilian Personnel Officer in UN Emergency Force. Kofi Annan briefly changed careers in 1974 when he left the United Nations to serve as Managing Director of the Ghana Tourist Development Company. Annan returned to international diplomacy and the United Nations in 1976. For the next 7 years, he was associated with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Geneva. He returned to the United Nations headquarters in New York City in 1983 as Director of the Budget in the Financial Service Office. Later in the 1980s, he filled the post of Assistant Secretary General in the Office of Human Resource Management and served as Security Coordinator for the United Nations. In 1990, he became an Assistant Secretary General for another department at the United Nations, the Office of Program Planning, Budget and Finance. In fulfilling his duties to the United Nations, Kofi Annan has spent most of his adult life in the United States, especially at the UN headquarters in New York City. Kofi Annan had, by this time, filled a number of roles in the United Nations, ranging from peacekeeping to managerial. And in the 1990s, there were no different. In 1990, he negotiated the release of hostages in Iraq following the invasion of Kuwait. 5 years later, he oversaw the transition of the United Nations Protection Force to the Multinational Implementation Force, IFOR, a UN peacekeeping organization. In this transfer of responsibility, operations in the former Yugoslavia were turned over to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. In recognition of his abilities, Kofi Annan was appointed Secretary General to the top post of the UN by the UN Secretary General in December 1996. He began serving his 4-year term of office on January 1st, 1997.
Right, let's do some more on Kofi Annan. A statement issued earlier by the family of the late former UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan, noted that they are saddened by his passing, but happy he impacted positively on the world. The statement added his wife, Nani, and their children, Ama, Kojo, and Nina, were by his side during his last days. Kofi Annan was a global statesman and a deeply committed international who fought throughout his life for a fairer and more peaceful world during his distinguished career and leadership of the United Nations. He was an ardent champion of peace, sustainable development, human rights, and the rule of law.
Let's do some more stories regarding the demise of Kofi Annan. And as the world mourns the demise of Ghanaian diplomat and Nobel laureate Kofi Annan, our reporter Benjamin Andrew has visited family home in Kumasi.
The late Kofi Annan was born in Kumasi, the Ashanti regional capital. His family home at Fantinu Town is also the palace of Otumfuo's Tudwinihene. When the TV3 news team visited on Saturday morning, a red cloth hung at the entrance of the palace, signifying the family's bereavement. Speaking to TV3, family head Nana Kofi Brel III said the family is devastated by the loss.
Everybody in the family look up to him as a role model without any scandal or anything. His father was same. Actually, in this house, we put a big worth on ethics, manners, respect, and education. And he was, he's a role model. Every child in the house, we tell, look, this is the house Kofi Annan came from. So if you also put in effort in your lives, you could also achieve like him.
Nana Kofi Brel described the late Kofi Annan as a great pillar in modern democracy. He said the family will forever miss him as they prepare to officially inform the Asantehene about the demise.
We are now waiting for the family members to gather. Then later we find a delegation to go and tell the Otumfuo what has happened to the family. So after that, we hope that the arrangements will be made for the 1-week celebration. Actually, this is his father's house. So this is where we are going to celebrate the 1 week. And we see how the way forward when the body will arrive and we see the funeral arrangements.
The former UN Secretary General died in Switzerland on Saturday.
You're on News 360 and we have some more stories on the late Kofi Annan. We bring you a biography of the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, who passed on at age 80 in Geneva, Switzerland.
Born Kofi Annan in the Ashanti region on April 8, 1938, he received his secondary education in Mfantsipim School, later pursuing his degree at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ashanti region. But at the age of 20, he won a Ford Foundation scholarship for undergraduate studies at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, where he graduated with a Bachelor in Economics. He proceeded to Geneva, Switzerland to join the World Health Organization as an administrative officer. However, political instability in Ghana after independence was a source of concern, having dreamt of returning to Ghana. Kofi Annan later became the Alfred P. Sloan Fellow at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology with a Master of Science degree in Management. He accepted the position at the United Nations headquarters in New York City just after the graduation and was posted to Cairo, Egypt as a Chief Civilian Personnel Officer in the United Emergency Force Office. Kofi Annan briefly changed careers in 1974 when he left the United Nations to serve as a Managing Director of the Ghana Tourism Development Authority. Kofi Annan later returned to the international diplomacy and United Nations in 1976. He was appointed to various offices in the UN system, including Director of the Budget in the Financial Systems Office in the UN headquarters, now in New York, in 1983, as an Assistant Secretary General in the Office of the Human Resource Management, and served as a Security Coordinator for the United Nations. Significantly, Kofi Annan in 1990 he negotiated the release of hostages in Iraq following the invasion of Kuwait. One Herculean assignment he took personal responsibility for.
It's not in conformity with the UN Charter from our point of view, and from the Charter point of view, it was illegal.
The functions entrusted to me
As Secretary General of the United Nations.
as Secretary General of the United Nations.
But in recognition of his abilities, Kofi Annan was appointed the Secretary General, the topmost post of the United Nations, by the UN General Assembly in December 1996. He served 2 terms as the UN Secretary General.
Saying goodbye is never easy. I have spent most of my life working with the United Nations. As we begin the next phase of our lives, Nan and I will still be with you in spirit.
The late Kofi Annan is survived by his wife and 3 children. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2001. Kofi Annan, on the dawn side to his career, blames himself for the Rwandan war and dedicated himself to finding lasting peace in that country.
The international community could not muster the resources or the will to come to the aid of the Rwandese people as quickly as we would have.
In 2002, the Asantehene Otumfuo Setutu II honored Kofi Annan by bestowing the title Busumuru on him. Busumuru is the sword used by the Asantehene to swear the oath of allegiance as the king of the Asante people. Now, cultural historian Osebonzo Safo Kantanka has been speaking to correspondent Benjamin Adu on the symbolism of the Busumuru title.
Otumfuo and Asante Mang, in recognition of the services of one of Ghana's illustrious sons to humanity, confer on Kofi Annan, the immediate past General Secretary of the United Nations, the title of Busumuru.
Most important sword of office in Asante is the Busumuru sword. This is the sword which the king of Asante uses to swear oath of allegiance to the people of Asante.
Safo Kantanka described the late Kofi Annan as a great man who will be missed by the world.
Kofi Annan is not a person who we have to toy with. He's a person of the greatest fame, and if we have lost him, the knowledge that he carries, the weight that he carries in society and all that it entails. Of course, we have to agree in no uncertain terms that we have lost a great man.
Busumuru Kofi Annan.
You're on News 360, and indeed we have to do some more and talk about the late Kofi Annan. We have in the studio His Excellency Patrick Hayford, is a former Director, United Nations, Secretary, General Office, and served as former Ghana High Commissioner, South Africa. And he's right here with me. Chief, it's good to speak to you. Welcome to News 360.
Thank you.
Great. I understand you worked closely with our father, our senior brother, the late Kofi Annan.
It was a great honor and a great privilege, yes.
Right. So, briefly, what are your fondest moments about the gentleman Kofi Annan?
Well, first, let me say this is a sad day for us all, for Ghana, for Africa, and indeed for the entire world. We've lost a great man, a great statesman, a great man of peace, who did so much to bring honor to all of us, and who did so much to promote world peace, who cared so much about our continent, Africa, and cared so much about Ghana. So it's a very sad day for us. You asked me my memories of him.
Exactly.
He was such a wonderful person to work for. What I mean is that he was always polite, always caring, firm but fair, an excellent leader, let me put it that way. And I recall in particular the fact that no matter what was happening in the world, he would arrive at work in the morning. Because he had worked in the UN for so long, he knew almost everybody. And from the security man at the gate right up to his office, no matter the crisis happening, he was always calm and measured in his utterances. And he would ask, by name of people's children and families, how everybody was doing.
Right.
In the midst of all the crisis. So he had that wonderful human touch.
Great. I'm sure one of the challenges in his tenure as the UN Secretary General was during the invasion of Iraq. The US overruled his advice against that. You were then with him. How did Kofi Annan feel, if you can remember?
Well, I remember very well. And as you rightly put it, he did his best as Secretary General in that crisis. And he rallied the United Nations to try and deal with the aftermath of what he could not prevent. But as you rightly said, he did his best, the best that he could to try and prevent what happened. And he spent a great deal of time and energy and effort in trying to deal with the aftermath of the invasion of Iraq and put in place a number of measures, put together an emergency team, and he tried to get the United Nations to carry out a very thorough investigation into the precise circumstances, of the tragedy. The bombing of the mission in Baghdad.
In Baghdad, yes.
And in fact, he had instituted a number of very important reforms in terms of the actual management of a UN mission in an extreme crisis as was occurring at that time.
Yeah, the invasion of Iraq.
Yes. No, but I'm talking about measures that he had taken to improve the security of UN buildings, especially in crisis situations. And he took so many other measures.
All right. You're watching News 360, and we are speaking to His Excellency Patrick Hayford. He worked very closely with the late Kofi Annan. We also have General Henry Anyidoho, who is Deputy Force Commander, Chief of Staff, and he was the Deputy Force Commander, Chief of Staff, United Nations Assistant Mission for Rwanda. So His Excellency Patrick Hayford will hold on for a moment, and we will speak to General Henry Ajidoho. General, good evening, and thank you for joining us on News 360.
Good evening.
Yeah, not quite a good moment to say good evening, but that is the greeting we have now. Now, let me go straight to the point. Kofi Annan accepted blame for the Rwandan genocide as UN Chief Security Officer. Was it fair for him to be blamed for what happened?
I'm sorry, there's an aircraft passing overhead. If you can just put the question back, please.
All right, I'm asking that
yes.
Kofi Annan accepted blame for the Rwandan genocide. As UN Security Chief at that time, was it fair for him to be blamed?
No, I don't know of he accepting the blame as a person. If there was a failure, it was a failure of the UN Security Council. At that time, Kofi Annan, the Secretary General, was then Under Secretary General responsible for peacekeeping operations when we were in Rwanda. And he couldn't have taken a decision on his own without the approval of the Security Council. And indeed, in the Security Council itself, the permanent five, they have the voice to decide what should be done at a particular place at a particular time. I have always said that our mission in Rwanda was the orphan mission of Somalia because of the events in Somalia. The Western world was actually not prepared to deploy any troops to any African country at all.
So, General, what was his role, and did he make any attempt to avert the war in Rwanda? If you can share with us.
As the Under Secretary General, his was to recommend to the Secretary General as to steps that were to be taken. When the genocide started, the normal way we operate in the UN system, when you're on the mission, is to send periodic reports, and in an emergency, you send reports as often as possible. And we were feeding New York with what was happening on the ground, and it was for the Council to take the very important decision as to what to do to avert a complete catastrophe in Rwanda. But if you recollect or you go through the UN documents, you will see that the killing started when the jet was shot down on the 6th of April. By 21st of April, Security Council had taken a decision and passed a resolution 912 of 21st April 1994, reduced force from 2,548 to 270. 270 from 2,548 to 270. In fact, what we did in Rwanda was to ignore that reduction in the force level and just kept the figure of about 456, which we thought we could manage with the situation at the time. So it was the fault or the failure of the UN Security Council. If this could not be attributed to Mr. Kofi Annan.
All right. Thank you very much. We're grateful for clearing this issue for us. That's General Henry Ajidoho. He was the Deputy Force Commander, Chief of Staff, United Nations Assistant Mission for Rwanda, and that was when the Rwandan genocide occurred. Let's come back to the studio and speak to His Excellency Patrick Hayford. We are back to the studio, Chief. So, Kofi Annan generally is accepted as somebody who, cared about peace in the world. Yes. He fought for human rights for every nation in this world. But we also remember that he was implicated in the oil for food program for Iraq, and later he was exonerated. His son was exonerated, and they were later exonerated. His son was later exonerated. So you were with Kofi Annan then at that time. What was his feeling during this challenging moment?
Well, may I first of all say how grateful I am that Brigadier General Ajidoho has clarified. I was a little stunned when you said that Mr. Kofi Annan accepted blame or responsibility for the genocide in Rwanda. He was not the Secretary General of the UN when the genocide in Rwanda took place. He was Under Secretary General in charge of peacekeeping. And I'm very glad that General Anyidoho has explained the primary responsibility for that terrible tragedy was that of the Security Council, which refused to act on the information which it had already received that something terrible was about to happen in Rwanda. And as he pointed out, the Security Council even went to the extent of passing a decision to reduce the force. Now, General Anyidoho was a very courageous man as Deputy Force Commander and leader of the Ghanaian contingent. They stayed on and did the best they could in a terrible situation. So please, especially we in Ghana, you, the media in Ghana, if I may make one appeal, we all feel terrible about what happened in Rwanda. Mr. Kofi Annan went to the extent of setting up a very important international commission called the Carlson Commission, chaired by a former Prime Minister of, I think it was Sweden, which investigated carefully what happened and reported. So please, my appeal is to be very careful to avoid blanket statements like Kofi Annan accepted responsibility for what happened in Rwanda. That's one appeal I would like to make to you.
We've taken that in good. Let's move on to the implication in the oil. How did he feel about it?
Now, oil for food, again, you see, there's a context. The UN Security Council did not, and I emphasize, did not approve the US invasion of Iraq. At a particular point, the Secretary General was asked to clarify, and it is clear that there were serious issues about the legality of what the United States did in invading Iraq. What happened, I was there at the time, is that at that particular period, the then President of the United States and his administration, particularly then Vice President Cheney, then Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, were incensed that the head of the United Nations at the time had the moral courage to speak out clearly about what had happened in Iraq. So a massive, well-orchestrated, well-financed effort was mounted to discredit Mr. Kofi Annan as Secretary General, to discredit Mr. Kofi Annan, the person, to discredit the entire United Nations. That, sir, is the larger context to everything that happened. And at the end of the day, as you rightly pointed out, the Volcker Commission, chaired by former Chairman of the Federal Reserve of the United States, Paul Volcker, came out and it was clear that mistakes were made. But again, the responsibility for the Oil for Food program was ultimately that of the members of the Security Council.
All right.
They failed in their oversight responsibility, but in the feverish climate of the time, we have come away with this unfortunate perception that the responsibility for the, I would say, the so-called oil for food scandal rests with this wonderful statesman. No. The ultimate responsibility, no, please, this is important, let me clarify for the attention of the listening and the viewing public. The ultimate responsibility for the management of the Oil for Food program was that of the UN Security Council membership. The administrative management of the Oil for Food program was the responsibility of the UN Secretariat headed by Mr. Kofi Annan. But the real management of the Oil for Food program was the responsibility of the membership of the Security Council. So again, it's important to make that distinction.
That point is well expressed. So,
yes.
As somebody who worked closely with Kofi Annan,
yes.
do you think that he achieved what he set out to achieve as a world diplomat? Did he achieve something from his mind?
He achieved a tremendous amount. He helped to bring civil society. You see, the United Nations is first and foremost an organization of nation states. But if you remember, the Charter of the UN starts with the words, "We the peoples of the world." One of the achievements of Mr. Kofi Annan as Secretary General was to systematically, very carefully, very shrewdly enlarge the space of civil society, bringing the people of the world into the conclaves of the UN. That's one of his most important achievements. Remember East Timor. East Timor is a sovereign state today, largely as a result of the work and the courage of Mr. Kofi Annan in dealing with the crisis at the time. He carried out major reforms in the management of the UN. Remember, he also is the one under whose watch we had the Millennium Development Goals, which helped the international community to come up with benchmarks to measure progress in dealing with poverty, health issues, and many other global problems. Okay. He played a key role in the international community mobilizing to confront the crisis of HIV/AIDS globally, but especially in Africa. And he did many other things.
All right, then, all right. I'm sure we'll find some more time to talk about His Excellency Kofi Annan, the former United Nations Secretary General, who just passed away. And we're speaking to His Excellency Patrick Hayford. He's the former director and also who served as former Ghana High Commissioner to South Africa. We are grateful for his contribution to our news tonight. We'll find some more time and do more on Kofi Annan. Now let's move on to some other stories tonight. President Akufo-Addo has released a statement on behalf of the people of Ghana following the death of former Secretary General Kofi Annan.
The government and people of Ghana, First Lady Rebecca and I, are deeply saddened by the news of the death in Switzerland of one of our greatest compatriots, Mr. Kofi Annan. I extend on behalf of the entire Ghanaian nation our sincere, heartfelt condolences to his beloved widow and to his devoted children, Ama, Kojo, and Nina, of this great loss. I am, however, comforted by the information after speaking to Nani Maria that he died peacefully in his sleep. A consummate international diplomat and highly respected former Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Kofi Annan was the first from sub-Saharan Africa to occupy this exalted position. He brought considerable renown to our country by this position and through his conduct and comportment in the global arena. He was an ardent believer in the capacity of the Ghanaian to chart his or her own course onto the path of progress and prosperity. Undoubtedly, he excelled in the various undertakings of his life, leaving in his trail most pleasant memories. His was a life well lived. I have directed that in his honor, Ghana's national flag will fly at half-mast across the country and in all of Ghana's diplomatic missions across the world from Monday, 20th August 2018 for 1 week. Rest in perfect peace, Kofi. You have earned it. God bless.
Or still talking about the late Kofi Annan, let's turn our attentions to social media, where a few high-profile organizations and personalities have, issued their condolence messages. And this actually broke earlier today, and this was from the Kofi Annan Foundation. This is when they were confirming the death, and it says, "It is with immense sadness that the Annan family and the Kofi Annan Foundation announced that Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the United Nations and Nobel Peace Laureate, Brett passed away peacefully on Saturday, 18th August, after a short illness. And the Obama Foundation tweeted this: "Today we reflect on the lesson Kofi Annan shared with us at the Obama Foundation Leaders Africa convening, that one is never too young to lead or too old to learn. A leader since his youth, a learner till his passing. We mourn the loss of our friend." And this is from the current UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. Kofi Annan was a guiding force for good. I join the world in mourning his loss. In these turbulent and trying times, his legacy as a global champion for peace will remain a true inspiration for us all. And of course, from the President of the Republic of Ghana, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, he also issued that on Twitter. We also have one from John Dramani Mahama, ex-president John Dramani Mahama, and he tweeted, "He lived and worked for global peace, security and sustainable development in very challenging times. A proud son of Ghana and Africa. R.I.P. Kofi Annan." And more coming in, of course, from Twitter. Jen Stoltenberg says, "Saddened to hear that Kofi Annan has passed away. His warmth should never be mistaken for weakness. Annan showed that one can be a great humanitarian and a strong leader at the same time. The UN and the world have lost one of their giants." And of course, this from British Prime Minister Theresa May: "Sad to hear of the death of Kofi Annan, a great leader and reformer of the UN. He made a huge contribution to making the world he has left a better place than the one he was born into. My thoughts and condolences are with his family." Of course, you can visit Twitter and you probably find a lot more of these coming in from all angles. You're still watching News 360. We'll be back with more. Don't go away. Welcome back to News 360. It's now time for Mission, which is supported by Star Ghana with funding from Danida, the UK Aid and the European Union. Now, the Ghana Education Service has supplied furniture to the Kachilendo District Assembly Primary School in the Pandai District of the Northern Region. Now, this follows TV3 Mission's report on how pupils are used on farms during instructional hours to raise money to buy school furniture.
5 months ago, when TV3 Mission team visited the Kachilendo DA Basic School, pupils had deserted classrooms during school hours to mold yam mounds. Kindergarten pupils collected the debris after burning the cleared weeds. They were supervised by 2 of their teachers. This was intended to enable the school to raise money to procure furniture. The headmaster of the school, Eric Hunkwe, justified his decision.
We're raising yam mounds to plant the yams. Maybe, God willing, next season we may get some yield, and then we'll use it to see if we can mold some of the dexes for the pupils.
This exploitation is done at the blunt side of their district authorities. After TV3's expose, the headmaster was authorized to stop the practice of using school children during school hours, but the problems of the school persist. Pupils sit on dusty floors, whereas others sit on broken pieces of furniture to do academic work. Assessment of kindergarten pupils is done through poem recitation.
Very small ways.
5 months on, the school has received support. The Ghana Education Service has supplied 80 pieces of door desk, 7 teachers' tables and chairs. All the pupils would comfortably have a decent seat when next academic term begins. Teachers say they have abandoned the 2-acre yam farm. Teachers are happy their major challenge has been addressed, but want more support to address their infrastructure needs.
Let's stay in the northern region. Female pupils of the Loloto DA Primary School in the Pandai district of that region are compelled to farm to buy sanitary pads. Now, Stanley Nibleu reports their problems are caused by single parenting and poverty.
Loloto is about 2 hours drive from the district capital, Pandai. The Loloto Primary School serves more than 5 communities. Here, pupils struggle to attain education. Teenage female pupils, for instance, find it difficult to attend school when they are in their period. They cannot afford to buy sanitary pads. Poverty and single parenting is the bane for many pupils here. The girls' prefect of the school and several others have taken to farming in order to support themselves. She owns 1-acre mixed crop farm, which she depends on to provide her educational needs.
This is what I do to be able to get money to buy pad and my books.
This has been a ritual since the last 3 years. An open forum organized by the mission team to discuss the issue was attended by majority of the female pupils. The team engaged them in the use of dialogic communication method. Those who have been overwhelmed by their situation expressed their frustration.
Because my mother is dead, my father takes care of me. He cannot buy everything for me because of that thing, if I want to come to school, I will not feel better. My sister is taking care of me, but she's not around. If she gets somebody and she will message me money to pay my school fees, if she couldn't get anybody, I will be sitting there.
Others corroborated their stories.
I cannot tell my father in everything because if it comes about period, I have to be sad. I cannot tell my father, so he cannot buy pad for me. I will stay at home.
Because my mother didn't buy pad for me, I don't come to school every day. I will not get the thing master teach.
Most female pupils during their period do not go to school, and these impacts on their studies. The assistant head teacher of the school, Lucas Tatel Ntampuan, finds the conditions of the pupils disturbing.
Some students, they come to school very late, and then when you ask them, some of them, because they are girls, they find it so confidential to reveal certain issues to us. But when we go to investigate the issues, we realize that some of them are in their periods, and then they don't have money to buy pass, so they cannot come to school as early as possible. Some of them stay away from school totally.
He said the needs of the pupils are not the only challenges facing the school.
Parents, some are poised for their parents and their wards to be educated, but others, I don't know. It's like they are being forced to send their wards to school just because they've seen other children in school. They want their wards to also be in school as well.
The parents stressed the need for parents to prioritize issues of their girl child.
Majority of them are all farmers. So before daybreak, they're already off. They are going to farm. They don't even take time to see whether their wards will go to school or not. So they are left in the hands of their mothers.
The previous government factored in the distribution of sanitary pads to female pupils to curtail the spate of absenteeism.
Well, that's it for Mission Tonight. It is supported by Star Ghana with funding from Danida, the UK Aid and the European Union. Isa Moni is standing by with more news updates.
And in other news tonight, the Executive Director of the Ghana Standards Authority, Professor Alex Dodu, has declared zero tolerance for for non-compliance to standards. He said his outfit is taking a tough on institutions, manufacturers and individuals whose products or services do not meet safety standards.
The influx of substandard and uncertified products on the Ghanaian market has become a serious concern to many. Of more concern is the number of substandard electrical cables that have flooded markets across the country. This has been the cause of several fire outbreaks. However, Executive Director of the Ghana Standards Authority, Professor Alex Dodu, says the authority is addressing the menace.
What has happened is that the Standards Authority has declared a zero tolerance for any substandard product on the market. Our teams, as I speak to you, have been on the market. They're on the market and they'll be there for the next 6 months. We are trying to sanitize the market. The findings are scary. We have been on the market since last week, Monday. Most, if not all, the electrical cables we have seized from the Okanshi area, Opera area, sadly, I failed every test. And as we speak, we are working with the security agencies to go and just retrieve all of them for destruction.
The authority, he says, has scaled up the drive to check the influx of poor quality products into the country. Another cause for concern, according to Professor Dodu, are the numerous buildings that have lifts that do not conform to standard requirements. The authority, he said, is the custodian of weights and measures and inspectors of weighing and measuring devices under the Weights and Measures Decree 1975.
In Ghana, as we stand today, it's very difficult to have exact numbers, but Greater Accra alone, maybe 5,000, maybe 6,000 elevators, individual ones, maybe more. So nationwide, let's have a rule of maybe 10,000. In our books at the Ghana Standards Authority, only one, only one has been pattern approved. As we speak, one other agency has brought their elevators for pattern approval.
Professor Alex Dodu says his outfit will do everything to protect the public.
It's been quite challenging in the sense that we have a lot of things which pose dangers to health and safety. Over the years, collectively, we have ignored them. I know I've just mentioned lifts, but what about all those lifting equipment, the cranes? We have been to the ports. There's no way you'll be using cranes unless they are checked. And there are accidents on a daily basis. So what the Ghana Standards Authority Board has said is that this is our responsibility. Yes, we haven't done it over the years, but we cannot tell Ghanaians that we don't know about it. And so, yes, we've held our hands up and said that we have not done what we have to do, but we are doing it now.
You're still watching News 360 live from the News Hub at Adesanwe in Kanda, Accra. We'll be back with more news after this. Do stay.
Entertainment tonight, Ghanaian singer, songwriter and actress Rebecca Achampong, popularly known in the music circle as Becca, has tied the knots with Nigerian artist manager Toby Sani Daniel. And the residential marriage took place today, Saturday, August, at airport here in Accra. The strictly by invitation ceremony was attended by both Ghanaian and Nigerian celebrities. So celebrities including Sandra Ankovia, Chantel Asante, Jocelyn Duma, Zinel, Yvonne Nelson, Jackie Apia, Stacey Amartin, and others attended the show.
Well, for those of you who love music, you can tune in to Onya 95.1 FM, where the new show, Kasimu, will be starting today. That's the maiden edition. It will start from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. It's hosted by the one and only Dr. Duncan. So definitely tune in to Onya 95.1 FM. And that's it for News 360 live from the News Hub at Adesanwe in Kanda, Accra. I am Solis Rose Corte.
I'm Mr. Money. There will be more updates on 3news.com.